All right, welcome everyone to the GSA SmartPay Forum 2021. Virtual year again this year. I hope everybody's doing well. This presentation, we're going to go over the SmartPay Fleet Management Essentials. So this is all relating to the fleet cards out there for you guys. Hopefully most of you are, in some sort of fleet AOPC role or a fleet manager, something like that. So we'll get started here and go through the slide. We will have, I believe, a chat box open during the presentation that we will monitor. And then we'll also have some time at the end for some questions and answers. I believe most of this is going to be done on a chat box. However, at the end, we may have some live audio. All right, so this presentation, we're going to provide fleet managers, card holders information about the GSA SmartPay fleet card program. So this is available to all federal government agencies and organizations, including some tribal stuff, even like DC and whatnot. So we'll step through the overall program, SmartPay program, go through some stats and get you guys a little bit more info on the fleet card program. All right, so as you guys know, SmartPay overview, we provide purchase cards, travel cards, integrated cards, and then the fleet card. These are all available to about 350 federal government agencies or organizations. You guys all have access to the SmartPay program under the SmartPay 3 master contract. Your agency, especially on fleet, it's pretty important to note that you would draw up your task order, and you did this a couple years ago for the SmartPay 3 master contract. The master contract sets your minimum standards that the banks have to provide by, and then any additional requests that you have, you would put in your task order. As you guys are aware, there's no direct fees for using the SmartPay program, and you also earn refunds or rebates on your purchases. The refund and rebates for SmartPay 3 changed a little bit in their structure. So hopefully you guys negotiated that well, and we will actually touch on the fleet refunds coming up in the slide here in a little bit. All right, so FY20 as a whole, the spend was down, and I think we all know why, right? The pandemic really halted travel, and you can see that visually here in the chart. The red section is the travel, and you can see it dipped down pretty drastically and never recovered, still hasn't. So overall, there's about 28.6 billion in spend. I think that's down about 2 billion from 2019, FY19. Transaction count over there on the left, there are still 73.3 million transactions, and you can see the percent breakout there. So fleet made up 38% of overall transactions, and that's really not surprising. We all know the fleet transactions are relatively small in comparison to purchase card or travel card spend, mostly just because most of the transactions are fuel, right? So you're spending anywhere from say 30 to 100 bucks on fuel, depending on the vehicle that's being driven. And there's some larger maintenance stuff, but they just don't outweigh all those fuel purchases. We talked about refunds. For FY20, there was a total of 403 million in refunds. So all that money goes back to your agencies. And as I said earlier, hopefully you guys negotiated your refund rates well for SmartPay 3, and you guys are taking advantage of that and putting it back in your mission. All right, so fleet specific here. Again, you see the left, the kind of that overall chart. The green little layer at the top there is the fleet spend. Fleet doesn't make up a whole lot, about 5% of total spend. And that's been pretty constant through the past years. So, 1.45 billion of that 28 billion it comes from fleet. The top 5 agencies that make up the majority of that spend: Postal Service, as you'd expect. GSA makes up 435 million of that, and that all comes from the lease fleet, right? So a lot of your agencies lease vehicles from GSA, and with that GSA vehicle, you get your fleet card, and GSA pays that bill. So 435 million comes from those lease vehicles that you guys are driving. Um, Homeland Security, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Interior kind of wrap out the top five, and you can see that it drops down pretty significantly, pretty fast after you get past Postal and GSA. But they do have the two largest fleets in the government, so we would expect that to be true. All right, so for rebates, fleet rebates, uh, the average rebate is about 2 cents per dollar spent. I think that's gone up from what it was under SmartPay 2. And you can see kind of the breakout of what rebates were given for FY20 for fleet card only, right? So again, kind of correlates with the spend. You see, Postal Service is getting the largest chunk there. About 52% of the total rebates goes to Postal. GSA again, 8.2 million. Then it kind of wraps out the same order there. So you could go in and calculate, how much spend versus your rebate and get your average rebate per dollar spent. Most of the time, like I think in these top five, most of them are hitting that 2 cent per dollar. However, uh, I think there's one or two that might not be. So depending on your agency, you might go and look at that. It might help you gauge whether your rebate structure was set up correctly, or if there's maybe a little bit more that you could do on the next task order. All right, so there's several components of the SmartPay stakeholders and like who's doing what and supporting the program. Obviously, the Office of Charge Card Management, or SmartPay, provides overall program management and advocacy. The master contract, as you guys are aware, is issued by GSA. We negotiate all that, compete it, and everything. OMB provides some oversight. The network brands, so you think of your Visa, MasterCard, those brands that we use, obviously have a big support in the program. The banks, so your banks that are contracted right now are U.S. Bank and Citibank. Each one of them have a fleet offering under them, so like a subcontractor, if you will. Citibank is using WEX, and then U.S. Bank is using Voyager. And we'll talk more about those specific fleet cards here in a little bit. And then, of course, there's the agencies or the organizations that use the product and support the mission of their agency. Okay, so a little bit more detail on the spend here and the comparison to last year. Um, the fleet card enables you guys to reduce administrative processing costs, better manage tax payments, recovery, and collect detailed fleet management data, right? So all vehicles, most of them come with an individual fleet card. The fleet cards are not issued to an individual cardholder, like your travel card would be, or a purchase card. A fleet card always goes to like an asset, so a vehicle or equipment type use. All fleet cards are centrally billed, so they're paid for directly by the government to the bank. There's no individual liability there. It's all paid for by your agency. So again, the 1.545 billion in spend in FY20. You can see that was down from FY19. Total transactions were down. We have seen in general card count, like the number of cards, go up in FY20. That's an overall trend, even with purchase and travel. But the overall spend is down, and it's to be expected with the time, right? Okay, so fleet cards or providers accept them about 90% of the fuel stations. So all your big box like BP, Chevron, Texaco, Conoco. Those type of stations are pretty much always take multiple fleet cards. So WEX, Voyager included. There's some other smaller ones out there, but you're going to find acceptance at those big gas stations, name brand gas stations, pretty much no matter where you go. Um, there are also a lot of maintenance locations that accept the fleet card. So think like your Jiffy Lubes, your kind of fast service type places. They will also accept the actual fleet card. Now remember, when you go to a maintenance station, your agency may have limits on what could be bought there or a spend amount that could be spent there. So for instance, GSA Fleet usually has a limit of $100 that could go on the fleet card for a maintenance. However, they do have a process in place that if the maintenance exceeds that amount, they call in and get authorization from GSA, and they are issued like a Ghost Card, MasterCard, or Visa number, which ties back directly to that fleet card, and you would be able to see that within the electronic access system of your fleet card provider. So different solutions out there. Your agency may have it set up a little different, but just know that for the most part, for your fuel needs, you're covered pretty much everywhere you go. Also, the banks or your fleet card provider, so I should say WEX or Voyager, they also have pretty robust platforms that you can log into. They provide your level 3 data, so this is going to give you your gallons, your price per units. Also they have real-time authorization alerts, so you can really see what's happening in your fleet real time. This is very helpful, I know, for a lot of agencies, OIGs, if there's misuse or fraud. Kind of goes to the next point here. This allows for those managers or investigators to get instant notification when that card is swiped at a location and give you the details surrounding it. So, this level 3 detail gives you as a fleet manager a lot of ability to oversee your fleet. Take into consideration like lifetime cost of a vehicle, and then also monitor fraud, waste, and abuse. All right, so a little bit more about the acceptance and the comparison to like a Visa MasterCard solution. So both banks do offer a Visa MasterCard fleet card, so to say. And they have, super high acceptance, right? Like any Visa MasterCard has really high acceptance. Pretty much anybody that takes credit cards is going to take a Visa MasterCard. And we mentioned the WEX Voyager, there's 90% fuel locations and a bunch of maintenance locations depending on the maintenance shop and kind of what they are. Purchase controls, Visa MasterCard go by what they call a merchant category code. So they can limit that. It's very broad. You can also limit dollar amounts with a Visa MasterCard solution if you wish. With the fleet cards, with like a WEX Voyager card, you can do custom controls by dollar amount, like number of swipes per day, a week, product codes. So instead of a merchant category code, they're using a product code. So it's a little bit more granular. In the product codes, you get down to like the difference in fuels. So whether it's unleaded, super unleaded, diesel, diesel number 2, that type of stuff. So you can really set up some pretty good purchase controls around that. And you can even vary that depending on the type of vehicle, right? So if you have a group of sedans, and you want to limit the dollar to say $50 per swipe for gas, then you can do that very easily, as opposed to your big, tractors, that might take a couple hundred gallons of diesel. You can set a higher limit. Now, do bear in mind that a lot of pumps have their own internal limits, so that would override any dollar limit you had on your card. So if you had a $200 limit on your card per swipe, but the pump only allows you $100, you're stuck at $100. Um, and security wise, like a driver ID, you guys using the fleet cards, you guys know that you have to enter a PIN number in when you go to the pump. Most of them are set up that way. For Visa, MasterCard, that's not always required. That would be something you would set up on the card setup. So there's a little bit more security there. Uh, Data capture, we talked about that. Visa, MasterCard typically give you what was kind of like a level 2. So it would give you like station or location details, date, time, dollar amount. The level 3 with the WEX Voyager solutions really giving you, um, that price per gallon, like what do you pay in taxes to like local, state, federal type of thing, and whatnot. So again, you can use that level 3 data for transaction review, for life cycle cost, and then also for tax recovery. All right, so fleet managers and roles and responsibilities. So hopefully there's a few of you guys out there. So you guys are basically the liaison between the agency, organization, management, and the SmartPay contractor banks, cardholders, the office of, our office, right? The SmartPay office. So some of your guys' responsibilities is managing all GSA SmartPay fleet card programs. So you're going to manage your internal program, issue that task order. You're going to promote the use of the SmartPay fleet cards, take appropriate action if you spot fraud, waste, and abuse, resolve any technical or operational programs between the banks and your accounts. So you're going to set up your accounts. You want to make sure that they're set up correctly, organize your fleet within there and set up your transactional limits and all that good stuff. And then you want to develop some agency fleet specific program policies or procedures, right? So you want to make sure that your agency has, something out there when you give a new driver a fleet card and a vehicle that they know what to do with it. They know what's right, what's wrong, what it should be used for, where it should be used, etc. Much just like the vehicle itself, right? Like shouldn't be used for personal use. Should only be used for mission essential stuff and whatnot. So hopefully you guys put together some sort of little pamphlet. I know with the GSA leased vehicles, when the card is given to the agencies, there is a pamphlet in there that goes over kind of the do's and don'ts of the fleet card, like where to use it, what not to do, and it's a good little informational pamphlet that comes with the fleet card that they send out. So if you guys are on a GSA lease vehicle, that's there for you already, and hopefully you kind of duplicate something like that within your own agency owned vehicles. All right, so approving official roles and responsibilities. So often you guys are the first line of defense against fraud, waste, and abuse, right? So unlike a purchase program or purchase card where you might log into the EAS of the bank and approve a purchase, or you issue approval within your own agency financial system on a purchase, fleet transactions can be, there's a lot of them. We saw that earlier. So the transactional review might be a little bit more automated in some cases, but they still need to be reviewed and bounced against, vehicle information or whatever it is you guys have and maintain. So you should verify the transactions are appropriate, monitor, resolve any questionable charges, monitor employee compliance with charge card regulations, certify your monthly invoices if you pay the monthly invoices, like if you pay them monthly or if you do them daily, or however that process is played out in your agency, and then verify the receipt of purchase. So again, a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse stuff here. There's the cards with the vehicle, with the driver, really shouldn't be stored in the vehicle. They should be brought in from the vehicle at night so they don't get taken or misused after hours. But again, you should look at those charges. And depending on your agency and what stats you keep on vehicles, I can tell you that GSA Fleet does a pretty good job on their review of their lease fleet transactions because they maintain all of the vehicle information, and that card is tied to a vehicle. So it's very easy for them to compare um, how much gas a card purchased versus how much gas that vehicle holds. So, if they bought more fuel than that vehicle holds, then we know there's a problem, right? So it could be, just a misinformation or a lack of training, and they use that card to fill up the vehicle, but also fill up a generator when they shouldn't have, right? The generator should have had its own card to take those charges and fill it up or deal with the maintenance of it. So again, depending on your program, those are tools you have. The fleet data that you get with the fleet card is very robust, and you'll be able to uh, implement some of that. All right, so bank roles and responsibilities. So the mentioned the two providers before. So Citi, and Citibank offers MasterCard, Visa, and WEX. Again, we saw the benefits of a true fleet card like WEX versus Visa, MasterCard. US Bank offers Visa, MasterCard as well, and then also the Voyager solution. So a little continuation here. So the banks, they should be providing the fleet manager, the approving official, the ability to view current statements, payment history, account information for electronic payments. Um, there is a host of standard reports within the master contract, and if you worked more within your task order, they are required to send you that as well. So make sure you are getting those reports. And then they're there to provide any assistance with audits or investigations. So if there's questions from the OIG or even just the fleet manager, whoever it is, with the audit or investigation, you can go back to your banks and ask for assistance on that, and for either statements or transactions, whatever it is. And then they also do provide training. So make sure you take them up on training. There's a whole host of training out there, and I think even GSA Fleet at one time they do offer drivers training. So you can check that out as well. There's obviously the SmartPay forum right now. We offer training not only on fleet stuff, but all the other cards, and the banks offer it as well. Both Voyager and WEX should have classes within the forum that you could sign up for and get training there as well. All right, so some leading charge card practices. So you should monitor your reports. There's those mandatory reports. Ensure fleet accounts are paid in a timely manner to avoid becoming delinquent. Remember, your agency is responsible for paying the fleet card bill. It is not up to an individual. It's a centrally billed account. Publish a frequently asked question pamphlet or page on your internal website. Again, GSA Fleet, put something out there with the card when they issue a card. So, that wouldn't be a bad idea if you're issuing your own cards. Create a monthly newsletter. I know GSA Fleet, GSA SmartPay, both send out kind of quarterly updates, I guess you'd call it, or like a newsletter, kind of what's going on in the charge card world or fleet policies. So create one of those, send it out to your internal users, your drivers, your fleet managers, approving officials, whoever it be, just kind of like the policies and procedures, right? And then you can develop automated reports. So this, eliminates manually performing data analysis. As mentioned, GSA Fleet has a bunch of automated stuff to manually review those transactions and compare it to vehicle information and that type of stuff. So set something up like that, depending on how you get your data from your bank, whether you get a data feed every night or every other week. You can set something up pretty easy, probably on your side, to bounce it off different key elements of either vehicles or equipment, and just to kind of monitor anything that might go wrong. All right, so mitigating fraud, waste, and abuse. Kind of touched on this. Establish policies, procedures to detect and mitigate the risk of fraud, waste, and abuse. Emphasize the standards of conduct, ethics, and clearly state those consequences for misuse. Shouldn't be any different than any other thing. If they're misusing, government property, the card is part of that as well. Monitor your authorization controls and set reasonable transaction limits. Again, this is all adjustable within the bank's EAS, and especially like right now with the gas prices on the rise, you may need to adjust those, right? We saw gas go up. So your once maybe $35, $40 that filled up that small sedan isn't sufficient anymore. It might take 50. So you might need to change your transaction limit size on your card authorizations. So that way, your drivers don't have to try to, fill up twice, swipe that card twice at the pump during the same fill up. Leading practices for reporting. I mentioned contractor banks are required to issue reports to fleet managers. So those, again, address transaction, payments, disputes, delinquencies. Monitor those reports regularly. It allows your fleet managers to get a good sense of the program's financial condition and monitor for that fraud, waste, and abuse. Use them proactively, not reactively. So especially when it comes to invoice and program data, meeting OMB requirements, understand all the reports that are out there, develop those automated reports in the bank's EAS for your specific agency or organization. All right, so some just examples of some reports here. Account activity report, declined authorizations, dispute reports, unusual spending activity, and then of course master file, which pretty much give you everything. So declined transaction report, they all have it. You should be able to see that. If you go in there, you might see a bunch for like pin failures, but it's still something to keep an eye on. If it's a new driver, maybe they just didn't know what the pin was or they forgot it. But it also could be somebody got a hold of it and trying to use it. Maybe if you have a transaction limit, like a swipe per day set at 5 or transactions per day set at 5, and you see them hitting 5 transactions in a day and they're trying to swipe for another one and it got declined because of it, maybe that just doesn't make sense and it warrants a little bit further investigation. So all those reports are good. Of course, like I mentioned, there's a bunch more, and there's other ones that you could have set up in your task order as well. Okay, so some training. Engage in the bank sponsored training. I mentioned that, like Voyager, WEX, Visa, MasterCard, Citibank, US Bank, all of them have training right now during the forum. So review that schedule, get in there, check it out, the ones that are interest to you, and that will be useful. You guys are here right now, so attend the GSA SmartPay Virtual Training Conference. Ensure training is easily accessible. So like internally for your drivers, any fleet card user, make sure that you guys have training set up as an agency where they can go in and get the necessary information to use that card or that vehicle, that equipment in the right fashion. Address the standards of ethics, conduct, and clearly state the consequences again for misuse. All right, so with that, we're going to open it up to audience questions. We'll follow up on the chat box questions if we didn't get to them during the presentation, and we'll go right there. And then also, I want to make sure you guys have my contact information. So again, Shane Brocious with GSA SmartPay. Email's right there, shane.brocious@gsa.gov. You can reach out to me with questions surrounding the SmartPay fleet program, or any actual SmartPay question that you have, and I can assist. Thank you, guys.